Let's go back to the Premier League and to the Champions League. Daniel Harris is with us this morning. Daniel, out of nowhere, it looks like José Mourinho has discovered exactly what that Manchester United team should be, and then has turned away from it like, oh no, you're too good. We can't play this good football. We can't be the attacking brio and flair that we've just shown, surely?
I'm not sure, because it felt like if he didn't learn from Newcastle, then he was never going to learn. So then against Chelsea, he picked an attacking team, and then they didn't go out and attack. And whether or not that was his doing, or whether that was a lack of confidence from them, or a bit of both, it's hard to know. But then again, they improved significantly in the second half. So again, I guess we're saying the same thing. If that doesn't show him, then nothing will. So we'll probably see against Juventus. And at least, even if they aren't playing quite the same way, what the other element that needs to change and yet stay the same is that he needs to stop playing with the team. He plays different formations and different players all the time, and often during games. And now, it's been like this for a year and a half, where you're almost thinking he just needs to settle on something. And even if it's not quite the right formation to get the best out of the squad and not quite the right personnel, it will still be better than if he's changing, constantly searching.
Yeah, it's mad that he's still constantly searching at this point. Is that just because that's the type of manager he is now, that ultimately there's a bit of OCD with him, that he can't fix in his own head what it is that he's trying to achieve?
It's a bit of that, and also there probably isn't a right answer. There isn't a combination of the players that he has in his squad that will make the team as good as he wants them to be, because they aren't good enough to challenge. They're not as good as Manchester City. I think that there is a way of finding the best players in that squad and the best team that would mean they could finish second again. But there isn't a team that could win the league in that squad, and so he's constantly looking for it. Whereas really what he needs to do is he needs to try and work out what his best combinations are within the team and what gives him the best way of maximising what he has. And even though they came second last season, I don't really think we saw that. We saw a few decent performances, some brilliant goalkeeping, and a lot of frustration.
I think when you look at Manchester United and you look at the attacking options they have and how that forces José Mourinho to perhaps one day kind of settle for a more positive outlook. A conspiracy theory I have is this is all part of Ed Woodward's master plan, that during the summer he said to himself, well, José Mourinho has always played defensively, even with good attackers. That's because he's always had very, very good defenders to work with. So he withheld the cash on deadline day to sign Toby Alderweireld or whoever it may be, Diego Godin, or whoever they were going for on deadline day, to say to José Mourinho, well, actually, you've got a top-heavy squad, go and attack with it. I want this club to play attacking, attractive football.
I don't think Ed Woodward gives a solitary one about the kind of style that United play. But I agree with you in a different way, that I felt like when Mourinho came that first summer and he bought Zlatan, Bailly, Pogba and Mkhitaryan, it seemed like he was buying players so that he couldn't regress to the mean, so that he would be forced to play good football, because with the players that he bought himself, how are you going to manage anything else? But again, he confounded all the doubters and he found a way. But I think now it's going to be difficult for him. I think that there are still a couple of changes that might make things significantly better. I would say that if he could get Matic out of there and get Lukaku out of there and bring in Sanchez and Fred, then he'd have a team that would really be worth watching, and it would be almost impossible for them not to be worth watching. But those two players are hindering the kind of football United are going to play, because you can have Matic, who takes the ball off the back four, and he doesn't pass the ball quickly, he doesn't pass the ball forward all the time, he doesn't pass it incisively, and that's quite an important role in the team. And what he also doesn't do is he doesn't run around speeding up the game. And then up front you've got Lukaku, and actually the kind of striker, if Mourinho's going to play two wide players like Martial and Rashford, which it seems like he's going to have to, at least for the next bit, actually, if you want a big lump of a striker, then someone like Olivier Giroud would have actually been a better fit, because at least the ball doesn't bounce off him quite as frequently. But if United could put Sanchez through the middle, then you might see something a bit more fluid and a bit more incisive, because Lukaku is not playing well at the moment. His touch isn't there. You don't get any sense that he's likely to score when an opportunity comes his way. And the thing with him is he doesn't score difficult ones, and he's not a one really. I mean, occasionally, obviously. So I don't want anyone to say, well, look at this one, because obviously everyone sometimes scores difficult ones. But in general, he scores high percentage finishes, hit hard with the side of his foot or headers. He's not a one chance, one goal bloke either. And if you're playing in this United team, you sort of have to be that, because you don't get a lot of chances and you don't get a lot of clear-cut chances either. So if they were to maybe have a go at Sanchez at centre-forward, then they might see something a bit more interesting, because defenders wouldn't always know where people are going to be, because you've got a bit more opportunity to interchange there. You've got Sanchez, who's a bit more off the cuff than Lukaku, and I just guess that if defenders would much rather mark Lukaku than any of the other forwards that United have available.
I mean, it does. You mentioned Fred. It does beg the question of, like, what is the thought process behind these signings, and like, is Mourinho the man who is ultimately responsible for making these signings, or is somebody else buying these players? What's going on?
Well, I think it's quite easy. I understand why he signed Lukaku. He needed a centre forward, and he needed to replace. Zlatan scored 20-something goals. He needed to replace those goals in a team that, even with Zlatan's goals, wasn't scoring enough. So the players on the market at the time were, there was Morata, there was Lukaku, and if it was one of those two, he certainly made the right decision. And I mean, there was Aubameyang as well, who maybe could have been bought for a lot of money, but Lukaku was significantly younger, experienced in the Premier League. So although Lukaku certainly wasn't my idea of a Manchester United centre-forward, I can see why, given the options available, Mourinho bought him. Looking with hindsight, I mean, I say with hindsight because, I mean, I didn't want Lukaku at the time, but I totally see why Mourinho bought him. With hindsight, what he maybe could have done was spent all the money, or a lot of the money, on a winger and tried to turn Martial or Rashford into a proper centre-forward. But Mourinho likes a big man up front, and those two aren't that. And as for Rashford, his finishing isn't that good, although he does have the ability to score the difficult ones, which Lukaku doesn't. And Martial doesn't really make the runs of a centre-forward, and often doesn't look inclined even to make the runs of a centre-forward. So I do understand why he bought Lukaku. I understand why he bought Matic. He wanted someone reliable. He wanted some physical presence. He wanted someone he knew, except, like, Matic just isn't good enough. If you play in that position, you've either got to have the athleticism, like someone like Fernandinho, you've got to speed the game up, or you've got to be able to pass the ball quickly forward like Jorginho or like Michael Carrick. And Matic was neither of those things. So that begs the question, if he's so averse to leaving Matic out, and I don't think Matic has been left out of a single game since he's been at United for reasons of anything other than fitness or resting him, then why did he buy Fred? Because if you assume that Matic is going to play every game and Pogba's going to play every game, it seems unlikely that he's going to put Fred into that three. So given that he had limited funds last summer, to go and spend 50 million quid or whatever it was on Fred, I don't know what his plan was for Fred, because for me, Fred was the player who would play more like Michael Carrick. He would sort of a cross between Fernandinho and Carrick, in that he'd give you some energy, but he also looks to pass the ball forward quickly, and he can run with the ball. So it's hard to know what's going on there. Perhaps he's just settling into the Premier League, but it also just seems unlikely that at any point this season he's going to be picked ahead of Matic.
The aftermath on Saturday obviously got a lot of attention, and I think it's just classic José Mourinho in terms of how he managed to manipulate the whole situation. There was just a glimmer of the high ground available in José Mourinho's eye line, and he darted straight for it, and he managed to pin his flag down and take that moral high ground so effectively. It was so beautiful, so classic José Mourinho. I'm not sure about you, but I greatly enjoyed his post-match comments.
Yeah, it was excellent. I mean, the thing is it's just really that steward who ruined everyone else's enjoyment, because imagine if Mourinho had actually got him, what would then have happened? Because it felt like a bit of a hold me back situation. It didn't look like, if it came to it, Mourinho would be able to have the guy whose name now escapes me. But I would not be backing Mourinho if that actually became a row. But I mean, it's very hard to get agitated by that kind of stuff, because that's part of what we love about football. It's the opportunity to give it out when something goes your way, but not just to properly put it in someone's face. And I would never particularly complain about what was done when Mourinho does it, when it's done to Mourinho. It's just I guess it's part of the emotion and sentiments that we get to enjoy and express during football. And I mean, there is part of me that kind of thinks about what Matt Busby said, and said there should be no conceit in victory, no despair in defeat, and how, that kind of honour is, in its way, also a beautiful thing. But I guess it's not really how we relate to football these days, and the way that we relate to football these days is no less beautiful. So, but I agree that the way that Mourinho made that about his own virtue was spectacular in its delicacy, and yet also in its transparency. But he was helped, in fairness, by Sarri, who was very willing to play along and chuck his own guy under the bus. I'm not quite sure why he did that, but he was a willing accomplice to elevate Mourinho.
I mean, I think he did it because he understands exactly that's the right way to manage the situation and to come out. Because, like, in 3 weeks' time, we'll be like, oh, sorry, he actually handled that very well, didn't he? You know, get out in front of it, kill the story stone dead, made sure that actually this isn't something that rumbles on here. And I don't know. Sarri's pretty clever. He's been doing a really good job and kind of a slightly underrated job so far as, like, you know, having rescued Chelsea from the brink.
Yeah, I mean, he's made it go away effectively, and that was probably what he needed to do. But yeah, he has done a good job. I mean, I think that he's right in that Chelsea aren't going to win the league this season, and he knows that, and so it probably makes sense for him to say so. I mean, it's hard to say that they're over-reliant on Eden Hazard, because if you have players that good, of course you're going to be over-reliant on them, because that's why you have them, that's why they're that good. But I was kind of surprised to see Morata playing and not Giroud. I imagine United's defenders would have been quite happy to see that. And I feel like he probably won't have been happy with the way his team responded once United decided to start playing. So what he needs to do probably is kind of find a way of playing properly when Hazard is not on his game necessarily. And it looked for a little while, like for the first 20 minutes or so, it looked like Kovacic was going to do something. But in the end, that midfield has 3 good players in it, but they're still trying to gel. You've got Jorginho who's dictating it. I mean, he knows what he's doing because he does one thing and that's what he does. But you've got Conte who's trying to learn a different position, really. And in the end, if you've got that player and you're playing him not in the position that he plays, might you actually be better playing someone else? Because if he's trying to be a link man rather than the man who plays in front of the defence, I'm not sure that he's better in that role than Ross Barkley, but he's quite difficult to drop because he's someone that everyone thinks is great and has earned his right to, I suppose, go in that position. But didn't really see a lot of him on Saturday once the game got serious after half-time.
What do you think is going to happen in the game against Juventus? Because obviously these big games are rolling through from a point where, you know, 2-0 down against Newcastle, it looks like it's curtains for Mourinho. A couple of victories in the next 2 games in particular would suddenly catapult us to a position where Mourinho's feeling pretty good about life. Are they going to get a win at home against Juventus tomorrow night?
Probably not. I don't think they need a win, really. Because they couldn't beat Valencia at home, they put themselves into a bit of trouble in the group now, because Valencia got walloped at home by Juventus with 10 men. So it seems unlikely that they're going to win in Turin, but they might win in Bern. So if that were to happen, then United would need probably a point against Juventus and a point in Valencia to go through, or so it doesn't come down to goal difference. So I think United are capable of a point. They are capable of winning if they play really well, but it seems the way that United often have beaten good teams in Europe in the past is by coming out of the blocks and by getting a lead in the game. And that's often, I think, how British teams have done it. We saw Liverpool do it in 2005 when they got, obviously not in the final, but prior to then, and when they played Juventus at home, they blitzed them in the first 20 minutes. Because that English style of play in a night game, when you have a good atmosphere in the ground and people gets people going, it's quite hard to adjust as an away team, particularly if you're not used to playing against those players and playing against that style of football. The problem with this United team is they don't really do that. But I think that is probably the best way of getting this job done. They are capable of winning, they are capable of getting a point, but the problem is that once the game settles into a pattern and Juventus get their passing going, it's difficult to see United's defence not conceding at least a couple of goals. And that in its way is also kind of a reflection of Mourinho, because some of the ways that they're contriving to concede goals is not about, well, they're not elite level defenders. It's about organisation and confidence. And what we saw against Chelsea got in behind United a lot of times, and that is as a consequence of not doing the basics right. And things that any player at that level should be able to do, like stepping up in a line, understanding when to stay, when to go, clearing the ball properly, defending set pieces properly. And these are all things that this United defence don't do well. And it's not because they're not elite level defenders. I don't know why it is, really. It's because they're not being drilled properly. It's because they're not executing properly. They're not playing with confidence. Maybe it's a bit of all of those things. So feels a bit like United will have to score twice to get a draw, because it's just hard to see a team with as much attacking quality as Juventus not doing something about that. And if they are going to get a draw, they're probably going to have to score early and first, which they're capable of because they are playing with confidence now. And I don't think that conceding that late equaliser against Chelsea will actually hurt them that much, because in the scheme of the season, it was a big game for United to perform in, and it would have been a big win if they could have got it. But actually, if they don't get, they're not going to win the league, so they don't need the 3 points. If they don't get in the top 4, it's not going to be because they conceded a late equaliser against Chelsea like that. It'll be because they played like clowns subsequent to that. So I think that they will have some confidence, and they might have the ability to go out and play, but they're not really a first 20 minutes team, and that is something that they probably need to become.
Daniel, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
See you again. Bye.
Daniel Harris there giving us his thoughts ahead of the game against Juve and responding to the 2-2 draw at the weekend for Manchester United against Chelsea.